Hello and welcome to a new episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. I'm Rehan Morsi, and if you're watching the show for the very first time, let me reintroduce you to what the show is all about. The show is composed of a number of different segments. First, we take a closer look at the world of politics. Next comes business and finance. And we learn more about what's happening in the world of technology, in addition to the latest cultural and arts events. Then, and finally, we end with sports. First, we're going to take a look at the world of politics after the break. We start off with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi receiving on Tuesday the President of the African Development Bank Group, Akanamo Adesina, and his accompanying delegation. Presidential spokesman Ahmed Fahmy said that President el-Sisi welcomed the development of joint cooperation relations between Egypt and the African Development Bank, expressing appreciation for the bank's role in supporting development sectors in the African continent in light of the growing economic challenges on an international level. President el-Sisi affirmed Egypt's aspirations to continue and increase the volume of cooperation with the bank during the coming period in various fields and within the framework of objectives for the joint country strategy between the two sides. For his part, the President of the African Development Bank expressed honor to meet President el-Sisi, praising the Egyptian development experience in the past few years, describing it as a source of inspiration for African people across the continent. He added that the Egyptian people and their political leadership showed a remarkable ability to rise rapidly and achieve remarkable goals in many development sectors, specifically in electricity, water treatment and residential areas. President el-Sisi expressed Egypt's full support for the bank and its annual meeting, stressing Egypt's constant keenness to promote African interests at all levels. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry said Egypt lends full support to Iraq's security and stability and to Iraq's state efforts on the war and terrorism. Receiving the Iraqi House of Representatives Speaker Mohammed al-Halbousi, the top diplomat added that joint cooperation should be enhanced in such a way that the interests of the two countries and the two peoples align. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ambassador Ahmed Abu Zaid said the Minister Shoukry asserted the Houses of Representatives in both Egypt and Iraq play an important role in deepening historical ties. He added that under directives by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, cooperation with Iraq should be pushed further, especially along the trilateral cooperation mechanism joined also by Jordan. Earlier in the week, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi stressed Egypt's keenness to continue boosting cooperation with Iraq in various fields and on all levels. This came during the President's meeting with the Speaker of Parliament, the Iraqi Parliament, Mohammed al-Halbousi. The President stressed the distinguished Egyptian-Iraqi relations and asked al-Halbousi to convey greetings to Iraq's President Abdel Latif Rashid and the Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani on Sunday. The meeting also tackled enhancing bilateral relations on the parliamentary level and discussed the latest regional developments. For his part, al-Halbousi confirmed his country's appreciation for the deep-rooted ties with Egypt, saying Cairo played an important role in restoring stability in Iraq, achieving security and development at a regional level, and strengthening the Arab unity. He also expressed Baghdad's hope to continue developing cooperation with Cairo in various fields, especially in the parliamentary field, and benefiting from the Egyptian experience in building state institutions. Joining us over the phone is Dr. Sharif Amir, a political analyst, to tell us more about the meetings between the President and the Iraqi Parliament Speaker. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, what's the significance of the meetings from the Speaker on behalf of the Iraqi Parliament to Egypt?
Well, we all know that Egypt now is coordinating always with trilateral coordination between Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq. We know also that Egypt is keen to bring back Iraq to the Arab House after the American invasion in 2003 and what took place with the control of Iran of several institutions there. So President Sisi, when he came to office, he decided that we have to work intensively with our brothers in Iraq. I think that the meetings between the leaders of the three countries were always very crucial because it helped us to combat terrorism, to coordinate the diplomatic stance towards many issues, including the interference of Iran and interference of Turkey inside Iraq. I think President Sisi was was the first president, Egyptian president, who went to Iraq since decades. And this visit was a significant visit because it showed the Arab world that things could get along again, and what happened to Iraq could change for the better.
They also spoke about the trilateral agreement, like you were saying, between Iraq, Jordan, and Egypt. Why is this agreement important, and what are the benefits of having this trilateral agreement, or coordination, rather?
Well, these coordinations are crucial because Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq shared many challenges, mainly terrorism. And the three countries suffered from these attacks. And thanks to the coordination between our intelligence operators, we managed to stop this kind of attacks in Iraq. And we have seen once Iraq started to talk with Egypt and coordinate and ask for experience in combating terrorism, calm came back to Iraq. And same thing in Jordan. The second thing is, of course, the economic level. We share now a project of electricity, as we're doing the same thing with Lebanon and the same thing with Saudi Arabia. So we are sharing a trilateral project of production and distribution of electricity to Iraq through Jordan. This is very important because it shows the world, not only the Arab world, the whole world, that still the Middle East is not only a hub of oil and gas, but also of energy in electricity. And we could do our own projects by our own hands.
Yes. Sir, what kind of expectations? I mean, they spoke about economic issues as well, in addition to shared political expertise and experiences. What kind of economic projects do you think that this trilateral cooperation could provide, other than the electricity grid that joins the three countries? What other partnerships could we see in the near future?
Well, we have the agricultural sector. We know that Iraq is a very fertile country. It has the place as we have the Nile. So we could share the production of agricultural products. We can share it. We have open market. It could cost less. And let's not forget that now, and President Sisi hinted to this point, that we could all now work with our national currencies, and the dollar would not be abiding to everyone now. So I think that we could be now working with our national currencies. It will strengthen our economy. We have also other aspects of cooperation of small products, we all know that Iraq is still emerging from the rubble. So we all know that they could start some projects inside their own country by the hands of many Egyptians, as it happened before. We did the same thing in Libya.
Reconstruction, basically.
Yes, and I think that that's why the coordination has to continue between the three countries. And thanks to the vigilance of the leaders in these countries. Because we all know that many countries would not wish to see these three countries, Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq, to be with that force or development.
Okay, Dr. Sharif Amir, a political analyst, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. And in regional news, 2 Palestinian men were killed by Israeli occupation troops in an army raid in the occupied West Bank city of Nablus on Monday. The Palestinian Health Ministry reported the casualties, the latest in a year-long spike of violence that shows no sign of abating. The Israeli occupation military said that troops arrested 2 people suspected of assisting a gunman who shot 2 soldiers in the occupied West Bank town of Hawara last month. The army said its soldier came under fire during the raid and shot back, confirming hits. Violence has surged in recent months in the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem amid nearly daily Israeli arrests and raids. 3 other Palestinians were injured when Israeli occupation troops broke into Al-Dahisha camp in southern West Bank. The occupation troops arrested 8 Palestinians in the camp during the raid, while 4 other Palestinians were detained from the northern and central areas of the West Bank. Still in the occupied Palestinian territories, Israeli settlers broke into Al-Aqsa Mosque compound on Tuesday from Al-Maghariba Gate under occupation police protection. The settlers entered in groups and held Jewish prayers inside the mosque compound, while occupation forces enforced harsh measures against Muslim worshippers entering the mosque. The occupation forces have been preventing worshippers from entering the mosque for the last 2 days, and those inside were forced to leave. Over to neighboring Syria, 2 civilians were killed in an Israeli airstrike Tuesday, the 4th such attack on government-held areas of the country in less than a week. The strike came from the direction of the occupied Syrian Golan, targeting some points in the vicinity of Damascus and the southern region. According to the air defense, they were intercepted on most of the missiles. The official news agency there had earlier reported an explosion heard in the vicinity of Damascus. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights War Monitor gave the same civilian death toll, with its director Rami Abdurrahman adding that an unknown number of Iranian-backed fighters were also killed in the strike. On Sunday, 2 Iran-affiliated fighters were killed in an Israeli airstrike on targets in Syria, according to the Monitor, with Sana reporting 5 Syrian soldiers wounded. A rare car bombing also rocked Damascus on Sunday, with no deaths reported and no side claiming responsibility. In the Americas, an extraordinary moment in U.S. history is set to soon unfold in a Manhattan courthouse on Tuesday. Former President Donald Trump, who faces multiple election-related investigations, will surrender to face criminal charges stemming from 2016 hush money payments. Trump, who was impeached twice by the U.S. House but was never convicted in the U.S. Senate, will become the first former president to face criminal charges. The story.
Donald Trump, the U.S. ex-president and frontrunner for the Republican 2024 nomination, flew into New York City for a historic court appearance to face charges stemming from a probe into hush money paid to a porn star. With New York taking security precautions and the mayor telling potential rabble-rousers to behave, Trump was due to surrender at the Manhattan District Attorney's office on Tuesday and will likely be fingerprinted prior to appearing before a judge for an arrangement where he will plead not guilty. Trump, 76, is the first former or sitting U.S. president to face criminal charges. Trump would face 34 felony counts for falsification of business records. Citing a single source briefed on Tuesday's arraignment procedures, none of the charges against Trump were misdemeanors. Trump's plane painted in red, white and blue with Trump in big letters on the side and an image of the American flag on the tail arrived at LaGuardia Airport in Queens after a 3.5-hour flight from West Palm Beach near his Florida home. Trump's lawyers opposed videography, photography and radio coverage of the arrangement, where a defendant is brought to court to hear charges and to have a chance to enter a plea, saying it would exacerbate an already almost circus-like atmosphere around this case, detracting from dignity and decorum.
The Kremlin on Tuesday branded Finland's NATO membership an assault on their security and said it would take countermeasures. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters that they believe that this is the latest aggravation of the situation, saying the expansion of NATO is an assault on Russian security and national interests, adding that these forces them to take countermeasures in tactical and strategic terms. He did not provide further details. Finland becomes the 31st member of NATO on Tuesday in a historic strategic shift provoked by Moscow's incursion into Ukraine. The start last year of the Kremlin's offensive in Ukraine upended European security landscape and prompted Finland and its neighbor Sweden to drop decades of non-alignment. In a separate statement, the Russian Foreign Ministry said that by joining NATO, Finland had lost a self-identity and any independence. The Foreign Ministry said Russia's further steps would depend on concrete conditions of Finland's NATO integration, including the deployment of NATO military infrastructure and strike weapon systems on the territory. Moving to business and finance, and in separate speeches last year, the leaders of France and Germany warned their citizens of hard times ahead as the global economy encountered challenges ranging from trade conflicts through to all-out war. France, Germany and other European countries offset some of their strain on households with generous furlough schemes, followed up with a range of support measures to help consumers cope with inflation and, above all, surging prices of fuel. The story.
In separate speeches last year, the leaders of France and Germany warned their citizens of hard times ahead as the global economy encountered challenges ranging from trade conflicts through to all-out war. French President Emmanuel Macron declared the age of abundance over for Germany's Olaf Scholz. 3 decades of unfettered free trade that had delivered strong economic growth with low inflation were now drawing to a close. But if the aim was to prepare their publics for future sacrifices, their messages have fallen on deaf ears, as shown by the biggest German strikes over pay in decades and widespread French anger at Macron's plan to raise the retirement age. Instead, the protests suggest many Europeans have concluded that if the economic pie is shrinking, then what lies ahead is a fight to prevent their share getting even smaller. From the growing expense of caring for aging populations and tackling climate change to the knock-on of impacts of military and trade conflicts, many of Europe's problems are similar to those facing all industrialized economies. But they pose more immediate challenges to a region which funds extensive welfare states, prides itself on being the world's largest trading bloc, and whose over-reliance on Russia for fossil fuel-based energy was exposed by the Ukraine war.
The European Central Bank ECB is monitoring the current market tensions closely and will act to preserve prices and financial stability in the euro area. ECB Vice President Luis de Guindos said in a speech Saturday, saying he believes that the vulnerabilities in the financial sector, which grew fast and increased its risk-taking during the low interest rate environment. This was said during his participation in a panel at the event he was in, the Outlook for the Economy and Finance. joining us over the phone to tell us more about this is Dr. Mohammed Rojdi, financial analyst. Good evening to you, sir.
Hello, good evening to you and our audience. Ramadan Kareem.
Thank you, and to you too, sir. Sir, can you tell us about the warnings that we've heard from the ECB when it comes to financial turmoil within the European Union? What are the expectations for what will happen in the European economy?
Actually, I would like to start with the risk of banking crisis developing from recent global financial turbulence and hitting the economy even harder than energy shrunk tied to Russia war and Ukrainian, in my humble opinion. After a meeting actually in Brussels, the EU government has said the lenders in Europe are generally in sound health and in a position to weather a combination of rising interest rates and slowing economic growth. And in my humble opinion, this is a hard equation to have this balance. And the banking system is stable in Europe. Actually, Germany told the reports after the summit, and Dutch Prime Minister said, as far as I recall, generally, I think we are in good shape.
Yes.
The EU deliberations came in the wake of U.S. regulators shut down two U.S. banks, including Silicon Valley Bank, as far as I recall, and the Swiss orchestrated takeover of troubled lender Credit Suisse by rival UBS. The emergency actions on both sides of Atlantic revived memories of the 2008 global financial meltdown and the ensuing EU sovereign debt crisis, which almost broke apart of the euro currency, now shared by 20 European countries. Nonetheless, financial supervision in Europe remains in a patchwork of EU and national authorities pursuing common approaches rather than heading an actual signal European rollback. And all of those, in my humble opinion, would reflect on the global economy. And we can see easily a lot of the global inflation wave that's reflected on all countries nowadays.
Yes, sir. So basically you're saying that the issue is actually compounded because of a number of different factors. Would you say that this was also one of the factors that may cause an issue with the European Union is the American initiative of Investment Reduction Act, where they're going to be subsidizing green energy investments, I suppose. This is an issue with the European Union. Do you think this will also affect their economy?
Nowadays, as you know, and our audience, we are the entire globe. It looks like a small village. Everything happened in any country reflected on the globe, and I believe it will reflect more or less on the globe. But we couldn't 100% expect what will happen, but it will reflect for sure.
Yes. Sir, but we saw today that the European markets in general have stabilized, that there was a bit of a meltdown happening when OPEC decided to cut output, but now they're stable. Do you believe that this trend will continue on for the near future?
My humble opinion, I believe on one of the quotes for one of the famous philosophy which called Heraclitus. He said that the only constant in the life is a change.
Yes.
So I believe it will change, and you know this is the only constant in the life. It will not be constant and it will change, and there will be a fluctuation till reach to its to the peak points and return back to the norm.
Yes. Sir, do you believe that with what's happening in world markets in general, we could see another 2008 financial crisis happening?
I'm always optimistic. We have a lot of challenges, to be honest. We have a global inflation wave. We can see it easily. As far as I recall, in U.S., the inflation reached to 9%, which one of the highest inflation percentage from 40 years ago. And it reflected that the Fed increased the interest rate to reach, as far as I recall, almost 5%.
Yes.
As you know, and our audience. And there are a lot of challenges, to be honest. But I believe that we will find, the globe will interact and find turnaround solution for that in the middle term. And we are trying nowadays to have quick wins to control what's happening in the market, starting the inflation, absorb the liquidity, and a lot of challenges that will be monitored by the central banks globally, starting European Bank and the Federal Bank.
Yes, can we take a look on a more global scale now with the OPEC cartel basically saying that they're going to cut output by about 1 million barrels per day, and the world in general, or America and the European Union, asking for a price cap. Do you believe that there's an actual possibility that maybe the OPEC were going to start to price oil in a different form of currency other than US dollars? Is this a possibility? Because there have been threats from certain OPEC members that this may happen.
Do you mean that they will take conservative actions?
Yes, yes. It's a counteraction
to
a price cap that possibly could happen from the US. They were asking for price caps of $60 a barrel.
In my humble opinion, this will not fly, because we are in an open market, actually, and the open market, one of the most important characteristics for open market that is based on supply and demand, as you know, and our audience. So what will happen? It will be based on supply and demand, despite the fact maybe governments can subsidize this for a while, but it will not continue.
Okay, Dr. Mohammed Rujdi, financial analyst, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and move on. Still in Europe, German exports jumped higher in February, according to official data Tuesday, thanks to easing supply chains and strong demand from the United States and China. Europe's biggest economy exported goods worth 136.7 billion euros, a 4% increase on the previous month. The United States was the top destination for made-in-Germany goods, with exports up 9.4% on January. Shipments to China, Germany's biggest trading partner, climbed by 10.2%. Exports to fellow European Union countries increased by 2%. Imports rose by 4.6% month-on-month to 120.7 billion euros, notably due to a 6.7% increase in shipments from China. The German economy has coped better than expected with the fallout from Russia's war in the Ukraine and the resulting energy crisis, in part thanks to government relief measures and mild winter weather. But the export sector, a crucial driver of Germany's economic growth, still faced headwinds. The government expects that the German economy to avoid a recession and grow by 0.2% this year. European equities rose further Tuesday, while oil prices held on to Monday's surge after top OPEC Plus producers announced shock output cuts. London stocks nudged higher in late morning deals, while Frankfurt and Paris advanced in midday Eurozone trade. Yet equity traders remained anxious that spiking oil prices will stoke already sky-high consumer prices and spark more global monetary tightening. Oil had spiked more than 6% Monday, and equity markets mostly rose after several top OPEC Plus producers, led by Saudi Arabia, sprang surprise output cuts to shore up prices. The news gave a fresh headache for central bankers as they battle rampant inflation. Investors also digested data indicating a slowing U.S. economy that could potentially allow the Federal Reserve to ease back on its rate hike. Analysts said the figures suggested the world's top economy was showing signs of slowing down and could give the Fed room to ease up on its rate hiking cycle. Last month's turmoil in the banking sector had increased bets that monetary policymakers would pause their tightening early, while news Friday that U.S. inflation, as judged by the Fed's favored measure, eased further in February, had given dealers an extra spring. Earlier this week, world oil prices soared after surprise output cuts by top producers led by Saudi Arabia on Sunday. While equity markets mostly won modest on Monday as oil edged higher. Crude futures surged almost 8% at stage 1, a day after multiple members of the OPEC Plus Exporters Alliance unexpectedly slashed production by a total of more than 1 million barrels per day. The shock reduction will start in May and last until the end of the year, with OPEC Plus saying Monday the move involves Algeria, Gabon, Iraq, Kazakhstan, Kuwait, Oman, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. It came on top of a decision from Russia, also an OPEC Plus member, to extend a cut of 500,000 barrels per day. The oil cartel had already angered Washington in October by slashing production by 2 million barrels per day. OPEC Plus said in a statement on Monday that Sunday's move was a precautionary measure aimed at supporting the stability of the oil market. The Kremlin also defended the decision, saying it was in the interest of global energy markets for world oil prices to remain at a good level. Pakistan's central bank raised its key interest rate to a record 21% on Tuesday as the cash-strapped country bid to curb crippling food inflation and maintain the confidence of foreign creditors. Global factors have compounded consumer inflation already buoyed by Pakistan's weakening currency, energy tariff increases and hikes in food prices due to Ramadan. Food, beverage and transportation prices have all surged more than 45%. Putting pressure on household budgets and leaving many desperate. The SBP has hiked its key rate by a cumulative 1,025 BPS since January 2022. The rupee has lost more than 20% of its value since the start of the year. Pakistan is in talks with the International Monetary Fund to unlock its next loan tranche worth $1.1 billion as part of a $6.5 billion bailout agreement reached in 2019. In early March, the central bank raised its key rates by 300 basis points to 20%, exceeding market expectations in what many saw as a bid to ensure the release of bailout funds. In its statement, the SBP said an early conclusion of the 9th review of the IMF program was critical to rebuilding foreign exchange reserve buffers as Pakistan bids to avoid a possible default on foreign obligations. The only help so far has come from longtime ally Beijing through a $1.8 billion refinancing and a rollover of $2 billion in March. World of technology, NASA on Monday said Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen will join a lunar flyby mission expected to take off for the moon in 2024 as part of an expedition that will make the former fighter pilot the first Canadian to explore beyond Earth's airport. Hansen will be joined by 3 U.S. astronauts for a historic crewed mission to the moon that will be the first since the end of the Apollo program 50 years ago. NASA unveiled the crew on Monday for its first human mission to the moon in more than 50 years, including the first woman and black man to voyage into deep space. Christina Koch, a NASA astronaut who holds the record for the longest single spaceflight by a woman, will be a mission specialist on next year's Artemis 2 flight around the moon. NASA's Victor Glover, a naval aviator, will pilot the Orion spacecraft that circles the moon in November 2024, becoming the first black man to take part in a lunar mission. Rounding out the crew are veteran NASA astronaut Reed Wiseman, the mission commander, and Jeremy Hansen, also a former fighter pilot, now with the Canadian Space Agency. The 3 Americans and 1 Canadian will become the first astronauts to venture that deep into space since the historic Apollo missions ended in 1972. The Artemis 2 flight is a prelude to returning humans to the moon for the first time in half a century, an eventual mission to Mars. The 3 American astronauts have all spent time on the International Space Station, while Hansen, the Canadian mission specialist, will be making his first space flight. The 4 astronauts dressed in blue flight suit were, were introduced by NASA Administrator Bill Nielsen at an event in the Koch, an electrical engineer, spent 11 consecutive months in space and took part in the first all-female spacewalk while on the ISS. U.S. President Joe Biden's administration is making $450 million available for solar farms and other clean energy projects across the country at the site of the current or former coal mines, a part of his efforts to combat climate change. As many as 5 projects nationwide will be funded through the 2021 infrastructure law, with at least 2 projects set aside for solar farms. The White House also said it will allow developers of clean energy projects to take advantage of billions of dollars in new bonuses offered in addition to investment and production tax credits available through the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. The bonuses will incentivize more clean energy investments in energy communities that have been hurt by decade-plus decline in U.S. coal production. The actions are among steps the Biden administration is taking as the Democratic president moves to convert the U.S. economy to renewable energy such as wind and solar power, while turning away from coal and other fossil fuels that produce planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions. The projects are modeled on a site Biden visited last summer, where a former coal-fired power plant in Massachusetts is shifting offshore wind power. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said the new plan provides a bonus investment credit of up to 10% for clean energy production in struggling energy communities. In the interesting and arts culture world, pet owners were being allowed to bring their 4-legged friends to an Athens Modern Art Museum, an initiative by the museum to promote stray animal adoption. Dogs had a chance to view work at the EMST National Museum of Contemporary Art as part of events to commemorate World Stray Animals Day, to be held on April 4th. The museum has adopted a general pet-friendly policy, which is very rare for Greek museums, and organized Sunday's events with the local shelter for stray animals. There are a lot of people in the past who said that they really want to visit the museum but can't. And you can see the pets, and of course there are certain rules and guidelines, meaning that pets have to be vaccinated, needs to be kept on a leash, and of course needs to take care of accidents. This is according to the museum director, who brought her own dog. Dogs in particular suffer extreme stress and separation anxiety when they are separated from their owners, so the initiative of making the museum pet-friendly is to be able to give pet owners the opportunity to come to the museum and not leave their animals alone for many hours during the day. In sports news, Chelsea plays its first game since the departure of manager Graham Potter when Liverpool visits Stamford Bridge for a Premier League match between 2 underperforming teams. Liverpool is in 8th place and Chelsea in 11th. Both clubs are struggling to qualify for next season's Champions League. Potter was fired on Sunday, a day after a 2-0 home loss to Aston Villa. Liverpool is coming off a 4-1 loss at Manchester City, and as they played today, they were drawn at 0-0. Miami Open champion Daniil Medvedev said he will try to keep his sensational start to the year going as the tour shifts to the clay court season, but said he is realistic about his prospects on a surface where he has enjoyed far less success. The Russian called himself a hard court specialist at Indian Wells while complaining about the slow speed of the court, and it is hard to argue with his expertise. He won his 4th hard court event of the year in Miami with a 7-5, 6-3 victory over Yannick Sinner, and his lone Grand Slam title came in the U.S. Open's concrete court in 2021. The vanquished Sinner even joked that perhaps the European clay could help slow down the hard-hitting Medvedev, who claimed titles in Doha, Rotterdam and Dubai, and finished runner-up at the Indian Wells before his triumph in Miami. It has not been all bad news for Medvedev on clay. He made the quarterfinals of the French Open in 2021, the semi-final at Monte Carlo in 2019, and has beaten some of the sport's biggest names on the surface. But working against him is the limited amount of time he has to prepare ahead of the Monte Carlo Masters, which begins April 9th. And finally, Marco Bezzecchi claimed a maiden MotoGP win at the rain-lashed Argentina Grand Prix, also delivering a different victory for his team owned by motorcycling legend and 7-time elite class champion Valentino Rossi. Italian rider Bezzecchi finished ahead of Frenchman Johann Zarco and Alex Marquez, who started on pole position. Bezzecchi also took a 9-point lead in the overall standings after world champion Francesco Bagnaia, the winner of last weekend's season opener in Portugal, crashed off the circuit on a lap 17 of the 25-lap race. He was running in 2nd place at the time before recovering to finish 16th. However, such a lowly position meant he leaves Argentina without a point. This brings us to the end of this episode of Newsroom Live. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more.